folks, and welcome to another day in the Milky Way. Tonight, we got a great broadcast for you. I got some stories. I got this new stuff from the Wild West. It's called Young Wild West and the Prince of the Saddle by an old scout. This is a book, this is a magazine from the New York in October 24th, 1902. So there we go. We got stuff going on, and let's see where else is. What do we got here? I hope you're all doing good tonight. I got a lot of stuff that I'm going to share with you, and we're going to do here, and I'm getting things ready. But anyway, I hope you're doing good. Summer's going by so fast. It is really amazing how fast this summer has really gone by. Oh, that's what I need to do. We're going to do the old Wild West music. I'm going to try to figure out how to do that tonight. And we're going to do that. And we're going to do this. Yes. Some screens that you share audio. Share audio. Checkbox. Yeah. Steps. Okay. Okay. Screen share and share. Well, there's always some kind of share. Share audio system. Okay. Well, and now I have to have some kind of audio up. And I know that, oh, there we go. There it is. And I don't know how to get that with, but we're going to do the Wild West stuff. No, that's how I do it. Okay, let's see. We'll stop. Oh, yeah, there we go. And we're going to cancel. And then we're going to start over because I'm learning as I go. Hey, this is real life, real time, you know. But I'm glad y'all came. My garden is doing great. And can't wait to share that with you folks. I am going to get on that and right away. And I'm going to make a nice video of that soon. Okay. So we're going to do this. And let's see. I hope you can hear. Ooh, yeah. That'll cover up the dogs barking. There we go. Cool, huh? Yeah, maybe I can make it. I guess I can't make it. That's about as big as I'm going to make it. Yay! I hope y'all enjoyed that. But anyway, this is going to be, I don't know if it's going to be a 1 or 2 part series, but we are going to have this. It's going to take me a while to read this. It's a short story, but it's in a Wild West magazine. From way back in 1902. So what we got here is, Wild West Weekly, #1. Okay. I think that's how I knew I had it pulled up somewhere. I know I got to pull it up and then I can play it. And then there's just too many things going on. You know, this is way more than what you really think it's all about. You know, putting on a production. Did you ever put on a production? You know, I always wanted to go to school and you know, or be in school and have. I should shut that off. Yeah, there we go. That seems to be noisy, so I'm sure you guys are hearing all that noise. I was going to say, I always wanted to go and be in a play in school, and I never was. And look at now, I'm here with all of yous. You know, it's just one of those things. But thank y'all for coming. I got a bunch of new books that I came in the other day. Some history books. Oh, man, do I got a good one. This one here is that I'll share another time. It's The Adventures of Joseph Andrews, or it's the history of the adventures of Joseph Andrews and his friend Abraham Adams from guess where? This was published in 1857 from an earlier book from 1790 something. And here's his ugly mug. Maybe you can see. Oh, geez. Yeah, it's got to go back. Okay, there's his ugly mug. Man, does this guy have a nose on him? I tell you, crazy like. But anyway, that should be an interesting book. I'm going to read through it and give you a summary. Maybe I can find a PDF on that, but I ordered this CD with all these old magazines, and we're going to read through some of them and absolutely have a great time doing it. So anyway, there we go. I'm going to share with you guys right here. Share screen. And there we go. Wild West. There. Oh, I should have probably had it. Wild West Weekly. This goes with the Wild West. Wild West. A magazine containing stories and sketches of Western life. And here we'll play the music. Yeah. And we'll turn it down a little bit. Hey. There you go. We got the music playing. Sounds like Western-y stuff, you know. So there we go. And the Wild West Weekly magazine containing stories, sketches, etc. of Western life. Young #1. This is the first edition. It was a price of 5 cents. So, price of 5 cents. Okay, we got rid of the music. I hope you're all liking it. I'm just having a good time tonight. We're going to read this. Says here, issued weekly by subscription for $2.50 a year. Holy cow, you can't even buy a cup of coffee with that nowadays. Entered as second class. Matter, New York Post Office, entered according to the Act of Congress 1902, the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. Yeah, okay. So, anyhow. And this was October 24th, 1902. And let's see if we can make it any bigger. Yeah, there we go. Price of 5 cents. Chapter 1, The Prince of the Saddle by an Old Scout. Chapter 1. Oh gosh, I'm so excited. We're going to do some stuff going on. So some years ago, let's start this out. Some years ago, when the state of Wyoming was our most trackless territory, about 35 or 40 men of the border were gathered in a bunch on a level prairie in range of guns of Fort Bridger. From the fort, the adjacent grounds, many blue-coated soldiers of Uncle Sam were watching the group with great interest. And at irregular intervals, the group of men would scatter, and whoops and petals of laughter would ring out on the breeze. The cause of all was the wild horse was being broken into the saddle, or rather the border. Men were trying to break him. And it's always a fun time breaking a horse. The master of ceremonies was a tall man of perhaps 30 or so, who was straight as an arrow and as supple as a willow. The wealth of raven black hair hung over his shoulders, and his dark flashing eyes betokened nothing but honesty and fearlessness. This man was Cheyenne Charlie, one of the most famous scouts and Indian fighters of the Great West. Much has been written about this man, but for his real record, one must read the letters from the various army officers he served under while employed as a government scout. The writer had the pleasure of looking over these documents a few months ago, and it was from the famous scout himself that the facts upon which the story is based were gleaned. I shot a man who ran a newspaper down in Missouri for writing me up. Cheyenne Charlie took pains in impressing on the mind of the writer. So be careful and not put me down as a hero. I never was a hero. I knows one when I see him. The only real hero I ever did know was young Wild West, their Prince of the Saddle. From this remark, the conversation drifted farther, and it finally resulted in our meeting, young Wild West, in Wyoming, hence the story. The wild horse that the men were trying so hard to break was one of a herd that had been brought from the plains of northern New Mexico. It was a beautiful sorrel stallion with a flowing mane and tail that swept the ground. Cheyenne Charlie had bought the steed and had tried to tame him till he became disgusted, and now he bought the magnificent specimen of horse flesh out on the plains near the fort and offered him to the man who could succeed in riding him. Those rough men were judges of horseflesh. There was not one among them who had not felt the need of a good steed on more than one occasion. And here was an animal, if once broken, that was not only the handsomest, but would probably be proved to be the speediest and hardiest horse in the section for Fort Bridger. No wonder, then, that Cheyenne Charlie's offer to give the stallion to the man who could tame him created so much excitement and drew so many men of the border there on this day. All of them were types of vigorous manhood. Some were of the very reckless sort, daring to the last degree. But Cheyenne Charlie acknowledged himself beaten when he gave up the attempt to break the sorrel, and what Cheyenne Charlie could not do with the wild horse was through all who knew him to be hardy and worth trying. At the point upon which our story opens, two men, a tough older border scout and a half-breed, were as reckless as they were weary, had failed. Both were thrown over the sorrel's head, in spite of anything they could do before they had hardly gotten upon his bare back. In the crowd were 4 mounted men with lariats. They were there for the purpose of lassoing the stallion. Every time he got away from a would-be rider, "That's the matter with you fellas," roared Cheyenne Charlie, who was entertainingly enjoying the performances of the men. "There ain't one of you with that can ride her, that critter, and you know it. He's a streak of greased lightning, and that's why I bought him so cheap. Hark ye now, after all I tried him, that's once I'm going to turn him loose on their prairie. There ain't much use in me trying," observed a rather short young fellow in a new suit, buckskin trimmed and bright green fringe, as he stepped forward, signifying that he was to be the next aspirant for the ownership of the stallion. "But I reckon I can stand a fall about as easy as any of you, the rest of you." That's that Western talk, you know. Only listen to Jack Ruby, exclaimed the man in the crowd. Anyone to hear him would think that he had someone of an idea that he would ride their animal. "I ain't said so, I, was the resort of the third candidate. "But I'm going to try. Though for a horse are you too nice to a critter to be left and running wild." "Say, when you're ready, then," observed one of the two men who were holding and prancing the steed by the head. "I'm ready now. Let him go." And with a remarkable quickness, the young fellow seized the bridle rein and swung himself upon the horse's back. As the men jumped back from the stallion's head, he made a wild leap forward and then began springing up and down as though his feet were attached to a set of powerful springs. But the fellow called Jack Ruby stuck to his back and did his best to urge the animal forward. If he could get the horse running straight ahead, he might be able to tire him out and thus subdue him. But that is just what everyone else Oh, anyway. But that is just where everyone who was preceding him had thought. The sorrel stallion would not do this, however. He was averse to having a man on his back and felt it his duty to get him off every time one got there. For about 3 seconds, the stallion pranced about, and then dropping suddenly upon his forelegs, he kicked up viciously from behind and sent Ruby flying over his head, a dozen feet away. Once more, a loud laughs of the men rang out on the breeze, and picking himself up, the third spirit limped away, satisfied that no man on earth could ride this horse. I think if I had a saddle on him and I once got into it, I could ride him, remarked the smallest and lightest man in the crowd as he stopped to four carrying a saddle. If you fellers will help me put this saddle on, I'll bet I'll stay on him 5 minutes or else break my neck. Is that so, Weary? Inquired Cheyenne Charlie as he looked at the man pityingly. You have got a big opinion of yourself, and I'm awful sorry for you. All right, but just wait. I'll show you fellers a trick. Then you had never seen. Watching his chance, Weary darted forward and flung the saddle over the horse's back. The creature was not quivering with outrage and excitement. He pranced a little, but the men were adept at this game, and they held him down sufficient to allow the girths to be buckled and tightened. Then, by dint of much hopping about, the little man called Weary got his left toe in the stirrup and shot upwards into the saddle. Let him go, he yelled. I'll strike across their prairie like a streak of greased lightning. I ain't no lame coyote. I want her, The men did let him go, and like a thunderbolt, the sorrel started off. He ran for about 10 yards, and then wheeling suddenly to the left, dropped to the ground and rolled over as though shot. A scream of pain came from Willie as the stallion sprang to his feet and made a break for the open prairie, only to be caught by the dexterous swinging of a lariat and thrown. Half a dozen men rushed to the side of the man and lifted him up. His left arm hung limp at his side, and he was breathing heavy. Arm broke and hurt inside, said Cheyenne Charlie. Oh, Weary saddle didn't do so good on him. Take him over to the surgeon, boys, and let him fix him up. He won't tackle another wild sorrel stallion in some time, I reckon. Four of the men formed an improvised litter of locking hands, and scouts' orders were carried out in every letter. For the next 10 minutes, no one offered to tackle the horse, which was standing pretty quiet, though chafing under a bit with his mouth so unused to. Then the ugliest looking man in the crowd, a Mexican half-breed Indian commonly called Greaser, stepped up. This man thought on pretty fair terms with inhabitants of the settlement which bore the name of the fort, was not likely by the majority of the men. Dark stories were related to him and his connection with a band of road agents that had been broken up a short time before by the soldiers and the bordermen. As he stepped forward, a candidate for the ownership of the horse, one of the men in the party whispered to Cheyenne Charlie that he hoped the Greaser would break his neck. Maybe he will, was the reply. I reckon I can't master that sorrel, no Greaser can. The saddle was still upon the back of the stallion, though not exactly in its proper position. The Greaser stepped up, and after many attempts succeeded in getting in it by the way he wanted it. Then he watched his chance and got the stirrup. As he landed upon the animal's back, a regular circus ensued. Though the horse was not a bronco, he went through all the tactics of one, and being somewhat used to the sort of thing, the Greaser laughed triumphantly. He wore a pair of spurs, and he sank them deep into the creature's flanks in his effort to get him to start to run. But the sorrow would not run just then. He bucked and he jumped, and he used every effort to dislodge the man from his back without avail. But there were more ways than one kicking a cart, or a kicking a there were more ways than one way than kicking a cat, as the one old saying goes. And though the horse did not want to kill a cat, it looked as though he had wanted to kill Greaser. Suddenly, without least warning, the animal gave a mighty spring straight ahead and struck the ground with his forefeet with a shock that shook the ground. At the same instant, the shapely hind hooves flew high into the air, and it seemed that the stallion was going to do the act of tumbler in the circus. Greaser left the saddle like a shot from a gun and landed heavy on his back, or back of his head. He lay motionless as a log, and it was not until the horse had been caught that the man stepped forward to see if he was hurt. "You got your wish," said Cheyenne Charlie solemnly, as he made a quick examination and then turned to the man who had his hope that the Greaser would break his neck. "Do you mean that?" "Yes, his neck is broke, and he must have died as soon as he struck the ground. I guess I had better turn the critter loose. 'Tain't likely that anyone else will want to try him now." "No, I guess not. I wouldn't have him nohow. Does anyone else want a chance at the sorrow?" called out Cheyenne Charlie. Not a man answered. "If you don't, I'm going to let him go. He wasn't made for man to ride anyhow." At this juncture, a horseman was seen approaching in the distance, and for some reason, just why he didn't know, the scout did not give the word to let the wild horse go. He, like the rest, had riveted his eyes on the approaching stranger, for no one recognized him, and they all waited until the very lame old gray came to a halt in their midst, and a bright, handsome boy of 18, with a wealth of waving chestnut hair hanging down his back, dismounted. How are you gentlemen? What's going on here?" asked the new arrival, with a clear, musical voice. "Someone hurt?" "Well, yes," answered Cheyenne Charlie. "I reckon their Greaser is hurt somewhat, but I guess he don't feel it. Where'd you come from? And who might you be?" "I just came through a regular hornet's nest of Sioux Indians. Was the quickest resort. My horse was shot from under me. I managed to catch this one and ride away. The bullets flew thick around me, but I only got touched by one, I guess." It was not necessary for the boy to state that he had been in a very hot encounter. His appearance told that. His tight-fitting suit of buckskin was smeared with fresh bloodstains, and the sleeve of his hunting coat was slashed into ribbons. "Put her there, Part," exclaimed Cheyenne Charlie, extending his hand. "I don't know but I like you." "Thank you," replied the boy. He shook his scout's hand warmly. They call me Young Wild West, and that is the only name I got that I know of." Cheyenne Charlie gave a start. "I've heard of you, Young Wild West," he said. "I want you to believe me, but I say I'm proud to make your acquaintance." It was quite evident that the majority of the men in the party had heard of the name before, for they crowded around, all anxious to shake the boy's hand. He had such an easy manner and prepossessing air that they took to him at once. "So their Sioux are up to their tantrums again, aren't they? Eh?" I observed Cheyenne Charlie after a pause. "There must be something up, or they wouldn't show their hand so near their fort. Was there many in their gang that you had their trouble with?" "About 40. Old Gray Elk was leading them himself." I have strong reasons to believe that they are on their way to raid the settlers down near the forks. I rode hard to notify the soldiers at the fort." With these words, young Wild West turned and walked towards an army officer who was strolling that way, having heard that the man had been killed through the attempted breaking of the horse. The handsome young rider in the bloody suit of buckskin soon delivered his message, and then, as the officer hastened back to the fort, he came back and paused near the stallion, casting an admiring glance as the animal. As he did so, "Who owns this horse?" he asked. "No one," resorted Cheyenne Charlie. "He ain't worth owning, 'cause he's one of their few of a kind that won't be rode. Turn that sorrel Satan loose, boys. Hold on, hold on." The words left the lips of the young Wild West with a ring that fairly electrified the crowd. "Well, what?" stammered Charlie. "Well, if no one owns him, I'll take him. I'm in need of a horse, if anyone ever was. But you couldn't ride this one. None of us can." "Ah, is he mine if I ride him?" "Well, yeah, but never mind buts. I will manage him. See if I don't." The boy walked up to the stallion. The wild horse was now in a great pitch of nervous excitement, far more dangerous to tackle than he had been before. Cheyenne Charlie said, but young Wild West did not appear to realize anything of that sort. He patted the stately creature on the neck with one hand and seized the bridle, reins, with the other. Then, before the spectators, he scarcely realized it, he was in the saddle. The horse tried the same old tricks, only more vicious than before, if possible. But the boy answered to his every move with the grace that was to an equestrian. The rough, honest men assembled there looked on with astonishment depicted on their faces. It dawned upon them as if by magic that there ever was one of the least who could master that stallion. "Whoopee, boys!" yelled Cheyenne Charlie. "Did you ever see anything like that?" "Never," came on an anxious response, and they held their breath. The sorrel had tried everything that he had been so successful in before, and the rider was still in the saddle. When the animal attempted to roll with the young Wild West was on his feet and upon the ground, and when he got up with a leap, he was in the saddle again. It was too much for the horse, and with a snort that was half fear and half defiance, he darted over the prairie with the speed of an arrow. The astonished bordermen watched the horse and rider until they were lost to the view in a cloud of dust. "Ain't likely they'll ever come back," said one, and then they started for the settlement, taking the body of the greaser and the crippled gray young Wild West had ridden in with them. But what was that to their astonishment when 20 minutes later the boy came galloping up the single street near the fort with waving hat and loosened rein. "Whoa, Spitfire!" he exclaimed, and the sorrel stallion, now covered with foam, came to a halt, showing that he was under perfect control. "Three cheers for young Wild West, der prince of der saddle," cried Cheyenne Charlie, jumping up upon a barrel in front of the supply store. Okay, chapter 2, Trailing the Sioux. How is that gentleman, young Wild West, when cheered had ceased? "It ain't so hard to break a wild horse, after all, is it now?" "Not when you know how," replied Cheyenne Charlie. "By ginger, boys, their critter seems to be as gentle as a lamb." The daring boy rode the sorrel up and down the street a few times, making him face anything and everything, so as to thoroughly make him understand that there were nothing to be afraid of, and then dismounted. The horse rubbed his nose against the conqueror's shoulders as young Wild West held him close to the bit, thus showing a sign of affection that was remarkable for such a short acquaintance. Again, the men broke into a cheer. The stallion looked more shapely and more powerful than ever just then, but there was not one among them who invited the boy or envied the boy. He had proved himself to be the only one who could tame the animal, and that all there was to it. It was quite likely that even now he would allow no one else to ride him. A detachment of soldiers now came riding up. They halted near young Wild West, and the lieutenant in the command asked him if they were going to ride over to the Forks with them. Certainly, was the reply. I'm glad you got ready so quickly, though it's doubtful if the Sioux will make their attack before nightfall. I have orders to drive them back and kill every man of them if they comes to a fight. Well, the red demons are well armed, said young Wild West, as he mounted the sorrel and rode off beside the lieutenant, and the fact of old gray elk being in command of them is enough to warrant that they are on the warpath. And they were heading for the Forks, you say? Yes. Well, how'd you run afoul with them? I was chasing a small herd of buffaloes along the bank of a dry creek. All at once, the animals scattered and dashed off to the right with the speed of the wind. I had a pretty good horse, but he was tired out, and refused to turn as quickly as I wanted him to. Just then, a whole nest of Indians arose from the bushes before me and began shooting at me. I returned the fire using both my revolvers and sank the spurs into the rowels. The horse started then, and a running flight began. How it was, I don't know, but I must have borne a charmed life, for the bullets flew around me as thick as hailstones. I was touched once, but it was only a graze. Suddenly my horse was hit in the flank, and he dropped, throwing me over his head. I thought it was all off with me then, but I had 2 shots left, and I made up my mind to put them where they would do the most good. The nearest Sioux to me was mounted on a gray horse, and he had expended all his shots. He rode straight for me with his tomahawk swinging, ready to cleave my skull. When he was near enough, I knew I couldn't miss. I fired. He dropped. I caught his horse. It hadn't had time to dash away over the plain. Though the steed was crippled and poor, it could put up a good bit of gait for a short distance. And after that, they had chased me for a couple of miles. They gave up, and evidently thinking that they were getting too near the fort for safety. A close call, young fellow. Where do you live? At the Forks for the present. I never stop in one place any length of time. I have no relatives that I know of, and consequently no real home. And your name? Young Wild West. Is that all? Yes, that is all my name I ever knew. Well, why? How do you come by such a name? It isn't appropriate, though, I must say. And the lieutenant cast an admiring glance at the handsome, athletic young horseman beside him. All I know about is that I have been told some 15 years ago, a party of hunters found me on the plains of South Kansas. I was lying in a clump of bushes near the smoking ruins of a cabin. I was an infant of 3 years of age, and it was my cries that attracted the attention of the hunters as they paused to survey the ruins of the disaster a band of Comanches had brought about an hour or so before. One of the men took me in his arms and quieted me as best he could. He tried to make me tell my name, but I could not give him anything that sounded intelligible. So the man who had me in his arms named me Young Wild West, because it was the very part of the West where I was found, and I was so young. The hunters buried 3 bodies before they left the ruins. They were supposed to be those of my father, my mother, and my little sister, who were older than I was. The scalps had been taken from all 3. The hunters took me to a humble cabin and adopted me. His name was William West. So, you see, I not only bore the name that circumstances suggested me to be called, but his name as well. A remarkable story, said the lieutenant. Is your adopted father still living? No, he died 5 years ago. I've been hustling for myself ever since. I've managed to get quite a little schooling farther east, but I've never gotten what my mission in life is. Your mission in life? Yes, my mission in life is to do good to mankind in general and avenge the killing of my parents and my little sister. I congratulate you. You are a remarkable young fellow, young Wild West. I hope you will succeed in all your undertakings. Thank you. What do you think of my new horse? The lieutenant took a look at the sorrel for the first time. What? He gasped. That is not the stallion the men were trying to break over there near the fort, is it? Yeah, the same. Why, he appears to be tame as any horse now. So he is. I conquered him, and he realizes that I am his master. In 2 days' time, I will have him so I can turn him loose and make him come at my call. I have had a great deal to do with horses in my day, especially wild ones. They rode on in silence for a few minutes, and then the lieutenant said, Why don't you apply for a position as a scout in the government service? I don't care for a job. It would hold me too long in one place locally. My home is anywhere from headwaters of the Missouri River to the mouth of the Rio Grande. I was born in the Wild West, and I always want to live in it. But it will not always be wild out here, perhaps. Oh, yes. Yes, it will. Always be wild, to a certain extent, as long as you and I live anyhow. The detachment was riding at a spanking clip, and the place where young Wild West had been surprised by the Sioux was soon reached. They counted 3 dead Indians as they rode along, which showed that the boy was not only an excellent horseman, but a pretty fair shot as well. The trail of the Sioux was soon picked up. It led along the bank of the dry creek, through a long strip of timber, and hence through a growth of chaparral. It was not exactly in the direction of the forks, but young Wild West took a note of the fact that it ran in a sort of semicircle, gradually drawing in toward the forks. We'll find them in timber belt half a mile south of the settlement, he said. They are making this detour so they will not be apt to be seen. They want to make that attack a complete surprise so they won't lose many men. Old Gray Elk is a very shrewd one. There will be no Gray Elk after we get through with him this day, replied the lieutenant. Those whose name was Johnson, if they attack the settlers at the forks, that will seal his doom. And there will be a great uprising among the Sioux. A sure thing. There will be lots of work for us to do then. Times have been a little dull the last 2 months. Your message is the first that I've received at the fort. And to this effect, the Indians were not behaving themselves. The men are anxious for some sharp work. And by the looks of things just now, they will be apt to get it. The sun was about 2 hours high when the detachment of soldiers reached the chaparral. Young Wild West suggested that the lieutenant lead his men direct to the forks, while he would follow the trail and see what the red men were up to. Though he had only known the boy for a short time, Lieutenant Johnson placed the utmost confidence in him. He at once favored the suggestion, and after cautioning the brave young scout, he gave the necessary command, and the blue uniformed riders turned on a straight course for the settlement. Young Wild West patted his newly acquired steed on the neck and rode off the trail at an easy canter. I have named you Spitfire, he said, because you cut up and showed such an ugly temper when I first mounted you. I will keep calling you that, even if you never cut up again. The horse seemed to understand that he was being spoken to, for he picked up his ears and uttered a low whinny. The secret of the horse's sudden tameness was owing to the fact that the young scout had positively asserted that he was the master and then treated him gently, thus showing that no harm was the result of his captivity. The reader knows only too well that the horse is a very intelligent animal. There are some who are far superior to others in this line. There are exceptions where they have been known to show almost as much intelligence as some men. The sorrel was one of the exemptions. It seemed it was yet more than an hour's ride to the Forks, so the young Wild West kept right on. He was on alert for an appearance of one of those Sioux scouts who might have been kept back for the purpose of watching for signs of pursuit. The boy was up to all the Indian tricks on the calendar, as young as he was. About half an hour after he parted company with the detachment of soldiers, his eagle eye suddenly beheld something moving a little over half a mile ahead of him. He was riding through a clump of alders on the banks of a stream at the time, and with a shield for the gazing of anyone who might be at any distance. Okay, young Wild West at once brought his horse to a halt. An Indian scout, as sure as fate, he muttered. Old Gray Elk is certainly bent on attacking the settlement, or he would not send a scout back to watch for signs of pursuit. The redskin is coming this way too. Let him. I only wish it was Gray Elk himself. I would take his scalp back to Fort Bridger with me, or my name isn't Young Wild West. The boy walked his horse to the spot where he could part the tall alders and get a better view. For the space of 2 full minutes, he gazed directly ahead, and he nodded in a significant manner and exclaimed, he examined 2 of them, eh? Well, I'm not afraid of them. Let them come. Sure enough, there was another Indian horseman to be seen. He was off to the right of his first, but both were heading toward the clump of alders, which was the only place of cover in that vicinity. Many would have turned back and made a detour so as to not come in contact with the Indians, but not so for young Wild West. He was not built that sort of material. He started to follow the trail for the purpose of learning what the Sioux were up to and how he could learn any better by the meeting them to their number and holding a parley with them. This was his idea. He would wait for them, appear before them suddenly, and ask them what Gray Elk meant by attacking him this afternoon. If they acted stubborn and showed fight, he would drop them. That was all. Rather a big undertaking, some would say. Oh boy, one boy against 2 crafty Sioux Indians. It did not look as though he would stand much of a chance. But he had faced more than 2 come out alive, and there was why he was not hesitant to pursue this course now. The 2 Sioux did not appear to be in much of a hurry. Every now and then they would bring their steeds to a walk and scan the prairie on all sides. They were looking for me, no doubt. The daring young scout thought, they know I would most likely ride straight to the fort and notify the soldiers, and would probably mean that the detachment would be sent to hunt for them. Oh, he examined his 2 big Colt revolvers and saw that each chamber was properly loaded, and then proceeded to stroke the fondle his horse for about the 15th time since he had come to possess him. Nearer and nearer came the 2 savages. They were now less than a quarter mile away. They were riding side by side, conversing in their own guttural tongue, as smiling as though he was going to give a pleasant surprise to some friend who was dear to him. Young Wild West sat there in the saddle. The next minute, the mustangs ridden by the 2 Sioux crashed into the alders. Halt, cried young Wild West. in a ringing tone. Well, we're going to stop right there. Chapter 3. The two Indians. The gray elk is defeated. Okay, we're going to stop right there, guys. I hope you enjoyed that. This is kind of the Western thing. I kind of am into this Western thing. I live out West, so what the heck, right? But anyway, let's stop sharing. Let's do that. Let's do this. And then we'll play the music. We'll be like, yeah. Oh, it's not playing. And there we go. And then we got to play this. And then share. There we go. So, yeah, we got the music playing. Okay. That's my lame attempt, you know, guys, I always got this lame attempt. So anyway, we'll do that. Yeah. Yay. Okay. And we're going to take it out with that. What do you think? Okay. All right. So this was fun. It was kind of neat. Let me know in the comments and stuff like that, what you think of this reading. And it was kind of exciting. I kind of like these exciting adventures. What were people thinking back in the day? You know, sometimes we just gotta get out of our what do I want to say? We got to get out of the world that we live in and kind of fantasize. Use your brain and use your imagination. You know, we are way more than what we really are. And using your imagination springs new ideas. And that's what we're all about. New ideas. You got to have new ideas all the time. And this is a great way to go back in the yesteryear, you know, maybe a past life. Maybe you were young Wild West or a version of him. Or maybe you were, you know, one of the Sioux Indians, or who knows, you know, we were all something at one time, you know, or I wish we could be. And in this modern life where everything is push buttons and computers and TV screens and, you know, cell phones, and I could go on and on, you know, getting out there, you know, there's area out there, there's West out there. There's still areas of an unknown, untamed area with big animals, wild animals, you know, bears and stuff. Maybe it ain't quite like it used to be. But then again, we got all these modern conveniences, and I like to have a hot shower and, you know, a nice stove and an indoor place to live. You know, some ways life is pretty good now. You got to embrace the modern technology. It's a good thing to an extent. Don't let it get to your head. Remember, life is living, and we are all living this life. It's a wonderful place to be. And I hope you all can join me again for chapter 3. Remember, we're all in this together. Go out and do something nice for somebody. Share this video, subscribe, like, share it with somebody else. I'm trying to do my best. If you guys have a suggestion, yeah, my nose is itchy. If you guys have a suggestion of what you would like to hear, let me know, because I'll be glad to research it a little bit. Look into it, maybe read something from somewhere else. Like I said, we got a lot of good books. I like old history stuff. That's my preference. What would you like? Futuristic stuff? You know, sometimes there is some value in that sci-fi things. Just think about, you know, some of the movies that have been out there that are now coming true. You know, whoever thought of Buck Rogers, you know, and Flash Gordon and things like that, and Terminator, you know, Skynet. There is a real Skynet. You never think about it, but it is. Anyway, let me know what you think. Give me a comment, send me an email. It's all in the description below. Do what you can with what you got. Remember, go out and spread the love. You know, try to know your neighbor, know who you are. You know, maybe the thing is know who you are, and then you can know somebody else. That's a good thing. And before I get distracted with everything else, I got to let you go because it's a good evening, and go out there, enjoy the summer. It's summertime right now, 2022, and we are just enjoying the summer because it's going to be a cold winter. So take it with what it is and enjoy the season for what it is. Okay, and so stop my rambling. Remember, everybody, be the frequency you want to receive. I love you.